If you'd told me I'd end up risking my life for a woman I'd just met in the middle of a Wyoming blizzard, I'd have laughed right in your face. But blizzards have a way of stripping a man down to what's real. And that night in 1885, let me tell you, the world ended at the edge of my frozen eyelashes. I'd been riding for hours, coat pulled tight, cursing my own stubbornness. 45 years old, a dozen winters behind me, still too proud to take shelter when the sky started looking mean. You know what I mean? The snow swallowed the trail, turned the world into white noise, and when I finally made out that warped old church, Grace Chapel, all welcome, it looked less like salvation and more like a joke played on tired men. But you take what you get. I got my horse Thunder into the lee of the building, unsaddled him with hands stiff as wood, promised him a better night than the one we'd got, then braced myself and shoved open the church door. Place stank of old wood and dust and lost hope, but at least it was shelter. I set about the business of staying alive, scrounging wood from a collapsed roof beam, getting a fire going in the iron stove, bedroll near enough to keep the feeling in my feet. By the time I sat down, the wind outside was howling like every ghost I'd ever outrun. Pulled out a bottle, poured a slug to burn away the cold, and that's when I spotted it. A Bible left behind in a hymnal rack, leather cracked, pages swollen by years of damp. There was a letter tucked inside. I know I shouldn't have read it, but some nights fate puts things in your hands you can't ignore. The writing, a woman's, talked about loving and leaving, fever taking her before her time, telling her husband to find happiness again, to bring someone into their son's life. I sat there shaking, staring at those words, because 12 years ago my Eleanor, my heart, my anchor, wrote me the same thing as she lay dying while I was off chasing someone else's war. And that night, in the emptiness of that ruined chapel, it felt like the past was reaching through the storm, grabbing me by the throat, daring me to let go. I didn't believe in signs, but I couldn't stop hearing her voice, find happiness after me. Damn if I knew how. Come morning, the snow had given up, sky washed clean, and I could see the little town of Cottonwood Springs smudged against the valley, wooden buildings, blue smoke curling, a place that looked the same as 100 others I'd drifted through. I figured I'd resupply and move on, but fate, as usual, had other ideas. The storekeeper, Walter Jenkins, cheerful as a squirrel, got my order while a woman at the counter, tall, straight-backed, clothes patched but clean, caught my eye. There was something about her, not beauty, exactly, but a kind of don't mess with me grace you only see in women who've already survived more than you have. Next thing I knew, a kid burst in, hollering for Mrs. Watson, said some guy named Billy Granger was causing trouble again at her place. Woman's whole face changed, from surprise to stone. Then, almost as an afterthought, I saw her slip brass knuckles on as she headed out the door. Curiosity got the best of me. I followed, and found myself witnessing Billy Granger, all booze and bad attitude, lunging at her. She handled herself just fine, jabbed to the kidney, put him on the ground, but when he went for a knife, that's when I stepped in. Old habits, can't shake him. Twist his wrist, get the blade away, tell him to sober up or get out. Men like Granger, they usually bark more than they bite, but I could feel him clocking me, memorizing my face. This ain't over, he hissed, and if I had $1 for every time I heard that, Mrs. Watson, Clara, as I'd later learn, fixed me up, cleaned a cut I'd barely noticed. Her daughter, Tori, bold as brass and too smart for her own good, announced she needed someone to teach her how to shoe horses and, while we were at it, suggested maybe I could be her new father. I almost spit out my tongue. The mother blushed. The kid just stared me down like she was judging the weight of my soul. They didn't know me. They didn't know the baggage I carried, the things I was running from. Or maybe they did, and just didn't care. Next thing I knew, my horse Thunder threw a shoe. Hoof split right down the middle. No blacksmith for 30 miles. Clara offered to patch him up, room and board in exchange for repairs around her place, just until the horse healed. I tried to say no. I always try, but when the universe keeps shoving you in one direction, eventually you stop arguing. That's how I found myself at the Watson farm, fixing roofs, fences, pump handles, anything that needed a man's hands. It was the kind of life I'd spent years avoiding. Routines, conversations, the risk of feeling something again. But Clara and Tori, they had a way of getting under your skin. That kid's questions, her endless curiosity, and Clara's quiet competence. Never asking for pity, just doing what needed to be done. Of course, nothing good lasts. The banker, Ezra Blackwood, slick, snake-eyed, always dressed a notch too fine, came calling, holding Clara's mortgage like a loaded gun. Turns out there was a clause. Property had to be maintained by a male head of household or she'd lose everything. Blackwood had offered marriage. She'd refused. He wanted her farm and her apothecary, and now he was pushing her to the edge. $800 or a husband in 30 days, he said, his smile cold as sleet. That I wanted to keep my head down, patch the barn, mind my own business, but the lines kept getting blurred. Sheriff, mayor, even the town preacher started coming around, not so subtly suggesting maybe I could be the man to help Clara, at least until she found a permanent solution. I wasn't built for that kind of heroism, or so I told myself, but every day that passed, I got pulled in deeper. Maybe it was Tori's hope, or Clara's stubborn dignity, or the way fixing things gave my hands something to do besides shake. Maybe it was just easier than running, for once. Then the past came knocking. A U.S. Marshal rode in with news of the Harrow Gang. Outlaws I'd crossed years back during the war, their leader's brother sworn to get even with any man who'd worn Union blue, especially intelligence men like me. Now they were in the area, hunting me, and suddenly Clara and Tori were in the crosshairs because of my ghosts. I tried to leave, tried to convince Clara she and her daughter would be safer if I put a few hundred miles behind me, but she just looked at me, calm, steady, and said, "We don't run. Not from men like that." Together, we laid plans, secured the house, loaded the rifles, set up signals with Reverend Parker and old Joseph Two Rivers, the local Shoshone healer who'd taught Clara and her late husband half of what they knew about herbs. Joseph warned us. The gang was coming, and Blackwood was in on it, using outlaws to do his dirty work. Tori, too young for this kind of fear, kept asking if everything would be all right. I wanted to promise her, but all I could give was the truth. We're ready. That's all anyone can be. The day of reckoning arrived hot and bright. Nothing like the blizzard that had started this chapter of my life. Harrow's men came at noon, guns drawn, thinking they'd catch us off guard. But we were waiting. Clara shot straighter than any man I'd known. Tori stayed hidden, brave as a lion cub, passing ammunition when we needed it. I took down 2 of Harrow's men before the fight even started in earnest. The sheriff and his posse arrived just in time, thanks to our signal shots. Bullets flying, dust and blood and noise everywhere. In the end, it was Harrow and Blackwood, cornered in the barn. Harrow looked me dead in the eyes, snarled something about debts and ghosts, then went for his gun, but I was faster, and it was over before he hit the ground. Blackwood surrendered like the coward he was, hands in the air, stammering about being an innocent banker. Sheriff didn't buy it, and neither did anyone else.